share.
That's awesome. Ray, this is episode 189. And welcome, everyone. You're in the green room right now. This is before we officially go live. Ray and I and Aubrey, we've interviewed 570 guests and over the last 4 years. So we're going to do quick introductions and then start the show. So, Ray, you start, please.
I'll jump in. Hi, I'm Ray. I'm back home. I actually snuck out a little bit earlier this week and here in Silicon Valley. So welcome, everybody. So,
terrific.
Yeah, we'll go to Bill. Bill, where are you?
Well, I'm in I'm in Silicon Valley, just south of San Francisco, Woodside, California.
Woohoo! Excellent. All right, and Julia?
Well, I'm in New York. I'm apparently epicenter of this whole thing. Apparently in New York. So Manhattan looks a lot better than what you see on TV.
All right,
great to hear. Great to hear.
And our other New Yorker, Heather.
Yep, Heather Willems over here. I'm calling in from Brooklyn, and I agree with Julia. It's people are being very safe and very cautious, at least in my neighborhood where I've been. So, knock on wood, it's all going well so far.
That's great to hear.
Thanks, Heather. And Aubrey.
Hi, Aubrey. I'm the producer and calling in from the middle of nowhere in the mountains of California.
Very beautiful area. She's sheltering in place.
Nice. Literally.
No, this is great. Yeah. So one of the interesting things, there's a little bit of optimism. Spring's in the weather. Summer's coming up. I think people are feeling a little bit better. So hopefully things look like we're coming out on the other end of this, and it's gonna be fun. But hey, it's Friday, and it's DisrupTV showtime. So thanks for being here. This is, as Vala and I often say, this is one of our favorite parts of the week. Mostly because we get a chance to learn from everyone, but more importantly, a chance to share with everybody and your ideas and your thoughts. And so thank you so much for being on the show. And I think we're going to start pretty soon. So are we ready to go?
Let's go live.
Let's go.
Sounds good. I'm going to turn off the other guests and we'll see them soon.
Thanks, right, welcome, everybody. We'll be live soon.
Thank you, everyone, for watching.
All right. See ya. Bye.
Bye.
See you guys. Hello and welcome to DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, and our distinguished guests your questions live using hashtag DisrupTV, and we will do our best to answer. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Disrupting Digital Business. He's a sought-after keynote speaker and often contributor to Harvard Business Review, ZDNet. You see him on Fox Business, CNN, CNBC. He's everywhere. And in my humble opinion, he's one of the top futurists to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot, Vala. I'm here with Vala Afshar, and he is one of the top followers on Twitter. As you guys know, CIOs, CEOs, CMOs all listen to his sage advice, and of course, his uplifting tweets, especially during this post-pandemic period. But more importantly, you can check him out, his books. He's on TV as well, and more importantly, a voice of reason. So, but hey, this is not important about us. It's more important about who we're sharing and who we're bringing on the show. And we're going to bring on someone that's about and talking about the disruption that's happening in her industry. So who do we have up first?
Ray, it's our privilege at DisrupTV to have Julia Bardmesser, a Senior Vice President, Head of Data Architecture and Salesforce Development at Voya. In her role, Julia is leading the transformation of Voya's enterprise assets in data architecture and Salesforce to increase agility and speed, talk about the most important currencies right now, to market by eliminating redundant data silos, consolidating and automating data processes to deliver key insights from proprietary data and to reduce costs through reuse and infrastructure simplification. Every business needs this talent and skill set and capability. Julia has over 20 years of experience in data management, data governance, architecture, cross-platform solutions. So we're going to talk about end-to-end digital transformation in our segment. Prior to Voya, Julia was global head of data integration at Deutsche Bank, where she led the implementation of global metadata management platforms and enabled data lineage and robust front to back end quality measurements. You can follow all the work that Voya is doing on Twitter at VOYA. Welcome, Julia, to DisrupTV.
Thank you. That was wonderful. I didn't realize I was doing all of that wonderful stuff. It sounds great coming from you.
You are doing so much. I have to cut your bio down. We only have 20 minutes.
And Julia, you're one of the most humble people I know, and we've been talking about humility as a scarce resource. You're in one of the most disruptive areas in terms of banking today, and we've seen massive efforts to go digitization, and there was some efforts by other people, some of your competitors, some people in the marketplace. They're kind of dabbling in it. Talk about this world pre-crisis and what the legacy non-digital firms were doing, and then what you guys were doing, because there's a big difference between how banking is and transformed for most consumers and, of course, organizations as well. So let's start there.
All right. So a lot of companies that are not new companies that are cloud natives that start, never even seen the piece of paper in their offices ever as part of work. All the legacy company, right? All of the financial services company, insurance companies, retirement, banking, all of, there is a lot of conversation that's been happening and a lot of news. Digital transformation is not a new concept, right? We've been talking about digital transformation for a while. But the way a lot of companies in financial sector have been looking at digital transformation is more around cool stuff, right? Customer experience. Let's connect, way back when the new cool thing was, let's do a website, and then it's an app. And now we're really cool and we connect to Alexa. We as in financial industry. But a lot of it was concentrating on that as a way to draw in the customer and to differentiate. And a lot of things behind the real end-to-end digital, that was not as much on the plate, right? A lot of people had efforts into data analytics, but it was not through end-to-end connectivity and being able to digitize from the very first, from getting the information to the customer, from the customer, all the way to the end, to financial processing and regulatory processing and everything that we need to do.
That's great. And while we're doing this, I also want to let our viewers know that, we've got Heather Willems, our final guest on the show, actually drawing, and you can see some of the things that she's doing as she's doing live graphical recording here. We'll pop that in and out as we get in here. So pretty wild.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love that. Capturing Julia's brilliance in a poster. That's fantastic. But so Julia, for all of us in March, a light switch flipped. And immediately the world went, and I say March in the US.
Yes.
Immediately the world went to a distributed digital only environment instantly. So a lesson in this year is maybe that every business needs to think about end-to-end digitalization, because depending on this pandemic and potential waves and other events, we may be in this environment. And even if we get back to it'll be a new norm. So it's not, nothing is going to look exactly the same as 2019, no matter what industry, including financial sector. So when we talk about end-to-end digital transformation, what are some of these foundational building blocks you need in order for your business to be relevant in this next norm?
So I'm usually going to my killjoy position. You need to start with data. Right. Again, digital, there is a lot of stuff around digital that's very cool. Again, all the stuff that I've talked about before, where companies have been concentrating around customer experience, but to go end to end and to be able to take in information from your customer from only digital channels, you have to have an ability to move that much data and to understand this data. So you have a lot of requirements now coming. Before that, it was more regulation that were driving a lot of data governance efforts. But now that's how your data is coming in. Just as an example, have you tried, like a lot of us who travel have been trying to do disputes with credit cards? Right. Some of them are very nice. You go online or you go on the app and you click a button and you file a dispute. And for some of them, you have to call. And what do you hear now when you call somebody? You hear, we have a lot of calls, stay on the line, or we'll call you back sometime in the future, maybe in a week, maybe in 2. And then you're going to get your number in the mail. I don't want to open my mail. I'm in New York. I do not want to open my mail.
Right.
And then, and sometimes you will need to send us back your evidence. How am I going to send this? I can't print things, right? How am I going to print? There is no, you can't go, I don't want to go anywhere to any store to send. So that's the change that I have seen that across both banking and financial services, that not only you have to get the data in and understand your data and make sure that you can bring all of this together so you can do your data analytics and your machine learning, but you also need to enable your basic operations end to end be digital. Letters are going to go out of fashion.
Yeah, no, we're definitely saying this. And as part of that, I mean, there's been a whole bunch of contactless efforts that are going on in this post-pandemic recovery. And people have, I mean, if you hadn't even digitized a channel or thought about digitizing a channel, I mean, that has completely transformed. People want contactless. People are trying to do some other activities. What has accelerated the most for you? In terms of what you're seeing in terms of trends, what customers want, and also what's top of your priority list?
So the digital piece is absolutely how do you reach out to the customers, right? So that's part of my digital end-to-end. It's not only being on the coolest piece of, or on the coolest customer channel, but also being able to figure out what channel would the customer prefer. And I don't like letters. But my mom, for example, cannot get anything other than letters, right? She's not online on anything. And if you're trying to reach out and things like she likes going to the bank and talking to a person, well, you can't go to the bank right now, right? That's as a channel, that's going to go away or shrink significantly. So if from the financial services, if you're trying to figure out how to reach and who, it becomes vitally important. How do you know which customer you reach out? And again, it goes back to data, right? And the accuracy of analytics becomes really important, right? Because now that's your way to differentiate yourself. This is your way, because if you try to reach me on Twitter, I'm not on Twitter. I have a Twitter handle, I'm not there. I'm not reachable.
Right. Yeah, we know that.
We've been hunting for your Twitter handle.
I think I'm about to get on Twitter. Ray, a couple more conversations for Ray, and I'm getting on Twitter.
Please do. The world needs your advice. And speaking of the world needing your advice, our next guest is a best-selling author and a Silicon Valley investor pioneer, and he's going to talk to us about autonomous revolution. And this notion of, again, automation, removing friction, ability to anticipate needs and deliver. And it sounds like when you talk about data and use of data, the purpose seems to be to create a wonderful stakeholder experience by removing friction, understanding the importance of personalization and speed and convenience. So what is the role of data in your decision making? Why is so? What is it fueling? Is it fueling efficiency, personalization, relevance, speed?
Yes.
Or all of the above?
Yes, all of the above.
Yeah.
Efficiency becomes really important, right? Because a lot of companies have impacts on their bottom lines right now. And again, analytics, when a lot of focus of analytics was on creating of the new business, and data was powering that. But you also have huge power in data in removing friction. And the friction, it's not only for the customer. There is friction within the company that costs money. Friction generates costs. So that's where data it plays enormous role. And especially with this crisis, where all the efficiency you can get, you need to get out of your system, right? So data reduces friction. That's on one hand. Another one, accuracy of analytics that you have. That's also driving a lot of innovation and focus on the data that we have. So pretty much everything. And then looking at, even in the security, a lot of people are working from home, right? You have a lot of concerns around, can you hack Zoom? Right?
Yeah. And
Did you have an incident, right? Yeah. You have major companies that had incidents. Now then you have to look at data and saying, did you have where you impacted? Again, this is all back. Again, it's kind of a killjoy because it's not cool, it's just data. But not very much you can do around here without getting really good data, access to it, accurate, and understand what it is.
You know, the other thing that we keep hearing about is the fact that people have been using the data much more frequently than before, right? People might run a weekly report and check in on status, or they might even look at it at a daily level. But were you seeing the same requirement to see things at an hourly level, or even more quickly as people were going through some of these decisions?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And a lot of different, so you have to look at your full data set. Right. And I've seen a lot more of that. And I have seen a lot of requests from our teams that are doing business analytics and data analytics. Do we have this data? Can we find it? Do we have history? Can we track, right? What's happened before? What's happening now? Do we see change, right? Around hardship loans and all of that data. Again, there are a lot more requests. What's been running previously once a month, generating the report, exactly like Ray said. Now it's more on the daily side.
Got it. That is a big shift. I mean, and given the fact that, I mean, I saw some interesting stats as well that, home mortgages are up, people are looking for credit. I mean, all these requests are now all coming and people are at home. I mean, they actually have time to do this. They're not sitting in a commute, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I miss my commute.
You miss your commute.
So
I miss my commute.
Yeah, of course. We all do. I want to get in my car and drive. So Julia, my youngest child is 10 years old. So he's a digital native. I'm a digital immigrant. I wasn't born with mobile, social, cloud. My son was born with social networking and smart devices and wearables and so on and so forth. So he's got 8 years before banking is something that he's going to be interested in, as an adult, young adult, 18. So in 8 years from now, is he going to be partnering with new fintechs, or is he going to be partnering with digitally enabled banks that are able to, will he ever walk into a branch 8 years from now? What are your thoughts about the world of banking, especially with digital natives taking us to maybe 2030?
So I think the answer is both. So I think banks and financial services institutions that partner with fintech and figure out how to innovate within them and innovate with the fintech would be the ones that would survive. And banking and financial services are highly regulated industries. It's not that simple to get into that. Fintech, when it's small, it's easier to become a big presence, to be something that's in everybody's life. I think where the companies that would thrive are the companies that would partner really well between fintech and digitally enabled banks. In fact, some of the digital enablement will come from fintechs. In terms of the branches, I think branches are gonna go away, especially if, for example, what's going on right now will come back in waves. People will just get out of the habit, and your son will never get into the habit. I know on my daughter, she's a little older than your son. She's 20 years old. If she needs to do anything to call, she got a new credit card. She had to call to enable it, to activate it. It took her a week because she doesn't want to call. She wanted to do it online. She wanted to do it in an app. They kept telling her to call. Took her a week to activate a credit card for a teenager.
Wow, that must be a foreign concept. Trying to call, like what do you do? Like I gotta get on hold. I can't do anything right away.
In 8 years, my son's going to be in a level 4 autonomous car if he goes to a bank, and it will probably be just wave his card by the window and things are done. But we'll see.
Yeah, well, on autonomous cars, I actually came across a very interesting estimate recently. So speaking of data and autonomous cars, so the fully powered autonomous car would generate about, estimate is 4 terabytes of data.
Wow.
A day.
Wow.
Amazing.
4 terabytes. Yes. So all of us, or at least me, again, I don't do Twitter, but I am fairly active. I consume maybe 3 to 4 gigabytes a month on my cell phone. I don't watch movies on my cell phone. We're talking about 4 terabytes of data. Our infrastructure needs to be significantly different to be able to handle that. That's one car, right?
Yeah.
And it's all built on communication, but also think about all you can do with that data. Talk about
this is why Tesla is going to be the first $1 trillion market cap auto manufacturer, because they're a data software company that happened to build cars.
Exactly.
I agree.
Yeah.
Hey, we got one question from the audience here. Always confused which comes to technology or tools when you come to data strategy or governance. Any advice as to the best way to evaluate So.
Oh, well, it's the best way to evaluate is to figure out what problem you're trying to solve. There are a lot of tools on the market, and pretty much every one of those tools will tell you that they're the best at everything you can possibly think of. Lineage, cataloging, data governance, data definitions, what have you, they're best at all of that. What is the business problem you're trying to solve? Are you satisfying the regulator? Do you need to produce something for the regulator? Are you trying to bring money, business into the company? Are you looking for efficiencies? What is it that you're trying to solve? And then look for the tool that solves that. Don't go and say, well, I just want to have best of breed. Because it's usually expensive and it may not get you what you want.
Good point. Good point. We are here with Julia Bardmesser, Senior Vice President, Head of Data and Architecture and Salesforce Development at Voya. Anyways, Voya Financial. Thought I'd do it. Kind of fun.
Thank you, guys.
So hey, thanks for being here.
We'll see you on Twitter.
We'll see you on Twitter. She is a Business Transformation 150 winner, and of course, we hope to see her at Constellation Connected Enterprise in October. It's our small little event. So yeah, so we'll talk more about that. So thanks for being on the show. Thanks for coming in from New York. See you, Julia.
Great advice. Someone who's been in the financial industry for so long, tremendous business leader. And we are so honored to have our second guest on DisrupTV. Bill Davidow is a Silicon Valley pioneer who ran microprocessor division at Intel at the dawn of the chip revolution and was later Senior Vice President of Marketing and Sales. Bill founded Moore Davidow Ventures, one of Silicon Valley's premier VC firms in 1985. So a pioneer in terms of venture capital. Bill serves on the boards of California Institute of Technology and Stanford Institute of Economic Policy. He's the author of 3 books and co-author of 2, including The Virtual Corporation, which sold more than 100,000 copies. Bill's latest book, The Autonomous Revolution. So most books are about autonomous futures, discussing the effects of technology. Bill's books explain why technology is having those effects on our most important institution. He argues in the book that the era we're entering is a fundamental shift from anything we've ever known. Social, cultural transformation that's happened only twice before in human history. And when these transformations occur, everything changes, even the rules themselves. So this is why we have Bill on the show. You can follow him on Twitter. Great follow at Bill Davidow, Davidow. Welcome, Bill, to DisrupTV.
Hi, how are you?
Great having you.
Well, I'm enjoying being here, and I was enjoying the first part of the show, and learning all about how my life was going to change with all that data.
It's part of it, right? Data is the foundation for a lot of this transformation. It's the foundation for this autonomous evolution that you are talking about. And one of the things that I'd love to go deeper in is, we have one of our big things at Constellation, which is really about the autonomous decade that's ahead, right? And I was really excited to see what you're talking about in this autonomous revolution and where you see this future headed.
Well, the argument, we say what is going on is something we call social phase change. And the argument by analogy is when water goes through a critical temperature, it turns to ice, it changes form, it obeys different rules, fluid flow for water. We use different tools, we use pipes for water, don't work on ice. And our intuition about water tells us nothing about ice. And the argument is that our institutions are going through a similar phase change where they are following different rules, taking on a different form, using different tools, and our intuition about what is going to happen is lousy.
So in the book, you talk about social phase change occurs in our institution and institution change form, obey new rules, use new tools, and functions in, as you said, counterintuitive ways. How do you coach, or when you're investing in a company, how do you ensure that the company has a culture and leadership that appreciates and understands these phase changes? What are the muscles you need to develop in order to be attuned to this incredible velocity, both speed and direction of technology and markets? And certainly with COVID-19, talk about a seismic, as I mentioned, light switch event that really is forcing companies and business leaders to think in a whole new way.
Well, all right. First, I'd like to come back to COVID, because what I would argue is that all COVID is doing is accelerating a trend that was going to happen anyhow. So
Yes.
once we get through with coping with the disease, we're just going to see things accelerate. Now I'm going to sound like Steve Jobs. You just invest with people who are under the age of 30. But you know,
Ray, you and I are out.
We're out, man. We're done. Our careers are over. We'll have to reinvent ourselves somewhere else.
it turns out that businesses take on entirely new forms. You think about it, and your previous guest was talking about financial institutions. Well, think about this. I talk about something in the book called the information equality, where information equals what it can replace. So suddenly, a bank is nothing more than an information processing system, and it becomes an app on a phone. So now, you think about that. And here is a bank with all their assets tied up in big buildings with pillars in the front. And suddenly it goes away and it's an app on a phone. And it's very hard to eat your own business. So the traditional businesses fight to preserve what exists, because it's catastrophic if this change occurs. And what you really have to be prepared to do is to move to these new business models, which are totally different. The credit card industry today, if you look at credit card charges through the system, it comes out to about 6% of the total charges by the time you're through with interest charges and things like that. And then you say, hey, we can transfer money today between people for essentially zero cost. So if I'm a credit card company, I say, hey, I want to preserve people using MasterCard and Visa, and I want to take my skim off the top and things like that. And if I'm somebody like Tencent, I'm interested in transferring money, and I say I make money in a totally different way.
Yeah.
I mean,
That change is huge. And so the question is, where do we get to sublimation?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, it is things like that. You vaporize companies. I guess the analogy would be they turn into the cloud, right?
That's why I was kind of jumping into that. But you know, when you think about that shift, right? You're saying industries are about to be disrupted. This whole notion of automation is coming at a pace that people weren't expecting, but we've now pulled it through because of a crisis. People actually see the benefits of it. Where does the role in terms of monetizable productivity come back into play? You talk about reigniting monetizable productivity. What does that mean?
Well, all right. So in the book, I talk about something called monetizable productivity and non-monetizable productivity. And we've always lived with what I call monetizable productivity. And by that, I mean, you become more productive, and GNP grows faster than productivity. And when that happens, wages go up and you create jobs. Yep. Suddenly, we're seeing a phenomena that I call non-monetizable productivity. And I first learned about that when I was at Intel, and Bob Noyce would come into my office and he'd have a meeting with financial analysts, and he'd be so frustrated. And he'd say, the financial analysts are telling me that my company is not our productivity isn't going up. And I tell them, they're measuring productivity in terms of dollars per employee. I'm measuring it in terms of transistors per employee. It's growing 40% a year. The problem is prices are coming down so fast that I can't raise the dollar output per employee. Don't tell me I'm not being more productive.
That's amazing. I just love hearing you talk to the founder of Intel. That's just so cool. That's awesome. Amazing. That's amazing. Awesome. Well, how lucky are we, Ray, to have guests like Bill? Bill, last year, Walmart brought smart machines to inventory shelves in their stores, really doing mundane, redundant work. At the same time, they rerouted 30,000 of their employees to go to Walmart University to be trained to become personal shoppers in order to leverage e-commerce and last mile delivery of food. And so it was incredible new revenue opportunity, new business model innovation, but taking advantage of autonomous automation capabilities. So in your book, you talk about how do we rescue good jobs from the coming autonomous revolution. Can you expand on that thought? And because the fear for most when they hear autonomy and automation is like, for example, 3 million truck drivers not being employed because now you have autonomous trucks. So there's this balance of understanding how does technology and business be the platform to best serve society when we talk about things like autonomy and automation and good jobs?
Well, all right. You know, the good job is something that's really only existed for about 50 years. It was pretty much created by the labor unions and Franklin Roosevelt. And then companies started paying for your health care and you got retirement benefits and things like that. So before the 1930s, the good job, well, actually, I think the good job probably only came into existence after the Second World War. I think the good job is going to be very, very difficult to bring back. And one of the things we point out in the book is that our society before the Industrial Revolution was entrepreneurial. Everybody produced things and they sold them. I was on a farm and I produced things that I sold, or I made shoes and I sold them. After the Industrial Revolution, we started working for other people and we had a job. Now we are going back to an entrepreneurial society again. And that creates a number of challenges for us.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, we're definitely seeing that shift, right? And the question is, how do we get out of that, or how do we actually encourage that? I think it's going to depend on, what happens on the economic cycle and where we are. One of the interesting areas that you talk about in your book as well is really talking about where we create safeguards for humans and automation. And we worry about that as well, right? If everything's fully automated, what is the role of the human? We often ask 4 questions, right? When do you do full intelligent automation? When do you augment the machine with the human? When do we augment the human with the machine? And of course, when do we trust human judgment? What do you say to that?
Well, all right. I'm going to not answer your question directly because I can't resist the opportunity here.
Go for it.
I'm really hung up on is that you evolved in a physical world. Somehow evolution designed my senses to sense trust and to protect me from attacks. So my eyes, my ears, my feeling of touch, I don't touch hot things, are all designed to protect me and to create trust. And I'm going into a virtual world where none of my senses and my sensing mechanisms work anymore.
Yeah.
So you're putting me into a virtual world, and my life depends a lot on trust, and my defense mechanisms no longer work. And I think one of the real challenges is that we are not evolved to live in virtual worlds. Now, that doesn't mean we aren't going to be living in them.
Sure. But
we've got to think seriously about that, because in the physical world didn't have a purpose. A tree did not grow to be firewood. In the virtual world, the virtual environment has a purpose. And that purpose is increasingly to shape my behavior and to encourage me to do certain things. And so we have to think about what we as people, when we move to these data-driven environments, are going to be doing. And that is one of the big challenges. And one of the reasons, I try to live my life to make sure that I use these technologies to enhance the quality of my life in the physical world.
Right.
So what I try to do is use the technologies to enhance my life in the physical world rather than living my life in the virtual world.
That's amazing. Such amazing insights. So 35 years ago, you launched a VC firm in Silicon Valley in the physical world. And for 35 years, you assessed entrepreneurs and startup founders in the physical world, where you could read the room, you could use your senses to understand trustworthiness of who you were going to put your hard dollars in terms of investment. And for the last 2 months, all of the VC community members have had to, in the virtual world, listen to those pitch decks and founders. And so what advice do you have, being an iconic VC, to current VCs that can only assess their willingness to develop an investment thesis and invest in someone in a purely digital world? What do they need to do in order to enhance that sense and response and trustworthiness assessment muscles that they've developed only in the physical world until the last 2 months, and potentially for the next calendar year, depending on how much progress we make?
Well, quite honestly, I've got the advantage of being really old, but
So hire young people, but surround yourself with really wisdom.
Wisdom, yeah.
Right. No, I mean, I think that's really hard, because it's a lot harder if I've got to constantly interact with somebody to take advantage of them. On the other hand, when people are drifting into my life and out of my life, and so it is hard to build those levels of trust. And I think we're going to have to learn how to do it, but it's much more difficult, because our physical society evolved around trust. That's why we are tribal people, because we trust people in tribes. And we're seeing that evolution take place in the polarization that's occurring on the internet, where everybody has their own little groups that they want to be associated with, and that all think alike. And the question is, how do you develop trust on the internet? Because trust is central to all of this stuff. I mean, I've been reading about all these companies that in this COVID environment, there was one that was supposed to ship all these masks to people, and it raised all this money and then didn't ship anything, and it got hundreds of millions of dollars worth of contracts and what have you. Wow. I suspect that that would have been very difficult to do in the physical world, because it would have been a lot more difficult if I had been looking people in the eye.
Yeah, no, it's a different piece. And I think the digital signals around trust that you're talking about have to be there. We have to be used to what those are. We have to see, and you know what? We're going to be augmented by machines. I mean, those AI bots and AI algorithms are going to jump in and say, oh, no, that's not trustworthy. I know where this came from, right? I know this is definitely.
I know Ray is trying to replace me with a robot, but No,
I think our producers are trying to replace us. I was kidding. No, but it's part of it. And we are here with Bill Davidow, and he's written this book. And for those that are following along, it is The Autonomous Revolution, a very, very important book, really talking about that next big wave. I'm going to ask one last question here, which really is about what's the role of government in this? Do they have a role? Will they have a role? Will they even know what happened? I mean, if you see some of our legislators, you wonder how they even make decisions with some lack of scientific basis. I mean, there's only 3 or 4 people with science degrees in Congress, apparently, or something like that. So
okay, so government should have a role, or let me put it this way: I wish we didn't have to have government have a role, but I believe we're going to have. And one of the examples I'd like to give is the internet would be a much better place if micropayments existed, and the existing institutions. that dominate the internet, I think, don't see the benefit in micropayments, but most authors or most suppliers of information do, and so that would be the case. I look at my personal information, and I can tell you that there is no freedom as long as there is complete access to my personal information. And I would like to have ownership of my personal information, and that would require government action.
Wow, we're definitely seeing a different change here. So it is definitely a shift. All right, well, we are here with Bill Davidow, author of The Autonomous Revolution. You can check out his book as well. Follow him on Twitter for more insight at Bill, Davidow, one of the original founders of VCs, one of the most interesting books, all different topics and genres. You definitely want to check them all out. Everything from the virtual corporation to marketing high technology to, and of course, this book, The Autonomous Revolution, Reclaiming the Future We Sold to Machines, written with Michael Malone. So, hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Val, and thank you.
You're terrific. Thank you, sir.
Right.
Thank you. Wow. So much wisdom in that last 20 minutes. Incredible insights, and honor to, and it's so like, the founder of Intel walked into my office and we talked about XYZ. That's pretty awesome.
It is awesome.
Speaking of awesome,
we gotta give her a breather. She's been working really hard too. So
yeah. It's our privilege to have Heather Willems, founder, visual strategist, graphic facilitator. As an author, visual storyteller, and serial entrepreneur, Heather has made her life work to help teams gain clarity through creativity. And anyone who's seen Heather in action, absolutely stunned by her talent. After 15 years as a creative strategy consultant, she designed co-creation sessions with clients, creating transformational change. Her book, Draw Your Big Idea, is a result of years of working with some of the most influential companies and thought leaders in the world, from Johnson & Johnson, SAP, Disney, FedEx, Google, Lego, NASA. I'm assuming Heather's drawings will be someday on the moon and Mars. Her work has been featured for TED Talk, Today Show, MSNBC, Forbes, Mashable, Wall Street Journal, and all the key media outlets. She's a sought-after keynote speaker. She's spoken at CCE, South by Southwest, Conference for Women, Columbia University, Comic-Con, and so many more. Obviously, we get to see her at Constellation Connect Enterprise, and where 400 CXOs are always enamored by her talents and ability. An incredible follow on Twitter at Heather_Willems.
Look at this fan base. Look at this fan base. People are coming in all over.
Welcome, Heather. Welcome to DisrupTV. I wish we could draw you. I wish.
I know. It would be awful. We'd be doing stick figures.
Of your talent.
That's what we'll do at the next CCE. We're going to ditch all the content. We're just going to have drawing the entire time.
Hey, let's
awesome.
Look, we've been working with you for so long. I mean, you're part of the whole community here with Constellation. You're part of the community that, people that really love to bring ideas out and thinking about, really shaping how their ideas look, how they communicate, how they innovate, how they design, and think about that future. And so as we move more towards these digital channels, what's changed, right? What's the same? What's changed, in terms of the work that you're doing? I'm sure you're doing a lot more virtual events to start with. But is there a difference in terms of how people are engaging? Are there different techniques you're trying that are working that you wouldn't have done normally in a physical environment?
Yes, it feels like, the first couple of weeks, everything seemed like it was flipped on its head. We're like, what is happening here? And, that was a time when I actually went back deep into drawing. And I found, I can answer this question a couple different ways. One, for myself, I found that the drawing was a way to anchor emotion and to find stability. And there's neuroscience behind that, because when you're starting to put pen to paper, whether it's journaling or it's drawing out ideas, you're only focusing on one thing. So it's allowing your brain to process in, do the problem solving that your emotions aren't allowing you to access. Period. So that also translates into working with clients as well. As it's I found that bringing in the visual illustration work and getting people to actually engage. Will was talking about how we need trust and like create this human connection by giving clients like these drawing exercises. It allows them to do that problem solving. So the shift is, at least in the short term, and I'm so excited about how we can start to use this on a more regular basis, is really to get people to do problem solving and processing in different ways, not just talking something out or typing it out, but actually starting to draw up some of those ideas and do it themselves.
That's terrific. That's terrific. Wow. We had, Bill, an iconic VC, talked about the physical world allowing you to better assess trustworthiness and meaningful connections. Last week we had Rana Kaloubi, who's the CEO of a startup that spun out of MIT Media Labs, and her work in terms of machine learning and computer visioning was to assess emotion using AI. And she said, like, for example, leaning into a camera, your facial features, thousands of different data points to assess tone, sentiment, connectivity. So as you're in this digital only world and you're trying to capture the aha moments of a presenter and to shape the story in the most meaningful way, how do you do that in a digital world? Like, what are you looking for in order to make sure that you're capturing the essence of the story that the presenter is trying to convey to an audience?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I'm also thinking about the work that I do, not just working with presenters and keynote speakers, but also when I'm helping to design and facilitate the design thinking and problem solving workshops. Right. And really the key in both areas, and now that we've got whole life integration with our families and our partners, is really listening. Like, that's the key, is really putting all of the devices, all of the screens aside and focusing on what's being said. Every time that I start out when I'm facilitating sessions, as people are coming into the room, I always ask them a couple opening questions, but one of them is always in the chat, count how many screens you have open right now. How many tabs do you have? Right, I bet you have like 140.
I'm afraid to share my screen.
And so it's like
Ray's running a blog right now as we speak.
Right. As we speak.
I'm live tweeting actually.
So that's like it's a good reminder, and it's a visual reminder when it's up in the chat that we are very susceptible to distraction, even more so when we're in this digital space. So one way to start to honor the people who are in our rooms, in our lives, in our business, is to close down some of those screens and just be present and focus on what's there. And that really is the key to discerning like what those key messages are. When I'm up at the, whether somebody from my team or I'm up at the front of the room actually doing the graphic recording, the key thing that I'm doing is listening. That is the greatest skill set that anybody on my team has, is being a good listener.
So Ray, we're finding out Heather's superpowers, and one of it is that she can give you her undivided attention. So because we all wonder how you do what you do, so that's definitely undivided attention. That's awesome.
And what's great about that is it really makes people feel heard, appreciated, and going back to Bill's point, it creates trust.
I got a great comment here from Matthew. The gift of presence is the most precious gift you can give someone. So I think that's definitely true, right? And we're definitely seeing this, in this age. So
Matthew's a poet. Matthew's a poet, and he's actually going to be on our show, I think, in a few weeks. So we'll leave that to suspense. But hey, but the other piece is
interviewed so many people in a very interesting way. You've captured their thoughts. You've captured, the essence of what they're trying to say over the last year. Are there a couple folks that, just really stood out to you that were very interesting, or the audience or the time frame that you'd go back and say, wow, that was just so mind blowing that even you were like blown out of your proportions?
Some people that I've actually graphic reported for?
Yeah, people that you've talked to that you've said, "Oh my God, this is like amazing." I mean, because like you're like at the front seat at all these different events, and you're capturing people's ideas, you're synthesizing them, down to a point. If there's any kind of special events or special scenarios that you thought, that were just amazing.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the highlights really is going to CCE every year. You have and right now, especially, folks like Bill and like the guests that you have who are really looking into the future and seeing what is to come, like looking both at the past, to predict what's going to be coming down the line combined with the technology.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So as you're coaching executives to be better storytellers, so being present and developing, active listening skills is one. What other skills should business leaders develop in order to, establish meaningful connections with their stakeholders, employees, customers, partners, communities?
Yeah, great. I mean, right now, especially, it's communicate, and communicate. So it's just, having that transparency, bringing in some of the vulnerability. There's a really great, I don't know if you guys saw it this morning, but the CEO of Airbnb sent out an email, and it was like, it was filled with emotion. It was filled with empathy, and it was very clear, and transparent about, why they were making the decision that they were making. And I think another thing that it did that came across very clearly, and that is it came back to their core values, of being human. So I'd say when, if you're a leader at this time, it's embracing the values and the vision and the purpose that you've laid out in your organization, being brave enough to be vulnerable and transparent, and then just communicating very clearly in as many possible ways as you can, and repeating that over and over again.
Yeah, we're just seeing that shift. This is fun. So how did you get started? I think a lot of people want to know, because we're not all very good drawers, and we're also, it's taking the ability to capture the imagery, capture the essence of a concept, and these are complicated concepts, and then put them out there for people to see and discuss and engage in. How did you get started?
Yeah, I love that question right now. So my background's in photography, so I always thought I can't draw, so I'm going to take photos. And it's true. It started out of boredom. I was waitressing and just wanted to I started drawing what people's conversations were at the table. And I'm a little bit of a better communicator and talker than I am a waitress. So I ended up working at Capgemini to get started and learned, all of the facilitation skills and the design thinking skills that I have. And the drawing was one of them. But really, when I launched my business was in 2008. When the economy,
wow.
I mean, there's a lot of freedom. This is maybe sounds like, there's obviously, with respect to all of the challenges and sadness that's happening right now, there's also just a great amount of opportunity. Talking to my business coach, and we're the playing field has kind of been evened out right now, and there's so much opportunity to grow and innovate, and everybody, including our clients and our partners, we're all open to innovation and experimentation. And that's how I started the graphic facilitation agency. Was it was just kind of one of those questions, what if we did a business that was just drawing people's conversations? Let's make a website, see what happens. start talking about it and get excited. And, that's really how it happened. And, NASA really was my first client. So
That's
not bad for a first client. Yeah.
I know. It helped to be able to say, like, oh, it's not rocket science, except for in this case. It is.
That's awesome. So what a great story to share. The jobs report recently, 34 million, 15% unemployment. It's a depressionary state. And you started your company the last time this country was facing significant financial crisis. So a lesson to entrepreneurs, no matter what your background, no matter if you have a particular skill and you have passion and commitment and grit and persistence and optimism, this is the time for you to really add value. And what you're doing, whether it's at NASA or with Johnson & Johnson or Lego or Disney, I mean, some of the most creative companies are coming to you for advice. So any other advice you can share with entrepreneurs that are watching the show, thinking about, how do I shape my career in perhaps the worst financial times that our country has seen in decades?
Yeah, that's a really great question. One of the things that I've been doing passionately for the past several years is coaching entrepreneurs who are scaling up to $1 million. And so one piece of advice that I think is very important is you don't have to do it alone. So reach out, find a network, find an accountability group. I'm part of EO, which is the Entrepreneur Organization, and there's many other support groups, but there's many other organizations that support entrepreneurs as they're starting to pivot their career and grow. I'm also launching a masterclass that is called Pivot Your Career. So there'll be a lot more information. I have so much information I can't share about that. I'm just not sure we have enough time.
Well, this could be classes we'll be taking with you online, right? Master classes,
awesome. And we'll have you back on the show when you're ready to talk about it. I mean, it's.
I would love to.
I think it's great to learn from someone who's obviously a giver, and Ray said it, like, you captured the essence of conversations and connections, and the amount of parallel processing that has to happen to do that. It's like creative thinking, critical thinking, all of it combined, and out comes magic. So we look forward to the drawings of Ray and I. And again, please try to make me look handsome. I don't have Ray's hair, but
well, I definitely did some drawings behind the scene of Julie and Bill. I'll have to do another round for you guys.
No, they were great, and we actually a shout out to Alan Leposki, alumni here at Constellation. He did a little posted drawing, so check it out on Twitter. I don't know if it's as good, but he's just giving it a good shot.
We're trying. You've set the bar, so it's hard to do what you do. But
and I think Liz has one as well on our team, Liz Miller. But here's a question here.
You've inspired some of the top analysts in the world to draw. Like, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
We don't want to know if you can actually sketch and talk at the same time, and I mean that's a superpower. So Matthew,
I didn't today, but I saw the comment, and I plan to draw out from the video from what we talked about today.
No, this is awesome. So definitely catch Heather. She's going to be at our event. I mean, is this our 10th year? Maybe, I think so. It's the decade of CCE, Constellation Connected. Yeah, Constellation Connected Enterprise. So once again, thanks so much for being on the show. We are with one of the top talents in the world, Heather Willems, founder of Visual Strategies and graphic facilitator. You can definitely catch her for your digital event, your live event, your virtual event. And of course, we are having our physical event, we hope. And of course, you can follow her on Heather at Heather _ Willems, WILLEMS on Twitter. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much. You're terrific. Ray, my brain is just spinning. From Julia to Bill to Heather, just so much wisdom. This is why it's my favorite day of the week, because I get to be a student again. And And, I try to be a student every day, but Fridays are just remarkable. And speaking of remarkable, next week is going to be episode 190. Again, folks, we're getting to 600 interviews on DisrupTV. We're very fortunate to start with Paul Daugherty, Group Executive, Chief Executive and Technology and Chief Officer at Accenture. Paul is the author of Human Plus Machine, author of the annual Technology Vision Report from Accenture, and frankly, one of the smartest people that Ray and I know. So he's brilliant. Definitely tune in. Stacey Epstein, Chief Marketing Customer Experience Officer at ServiceMax. And one of our favorite guests, Steve Wilson, Vice President, Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. We always talk about distributed ledgers and blockchain, data privacy. And of course, we've got so much to talk about with Steve in terms of this distributed digital-only world that we're in now. So, Ray, next week's going to be amazing. This week was fantastic. Your closing remarks.
It's amazing, all the people we've brought together over the last 4 years. I think this is a fun Friday for you and I, and I encourage other people to jump in and join the conversation. Suggest folks that you think are amazing. We're gonna, keep doing this for, I hope, the next 4 to 5 years as we do this out, and and really reach out to more types of people who are willing to share, who want to share their ideas, want to share some of the things that they're excited about. That spirit of innovation. Things are going to be a little bit hard for a while, but that's okay, right? There is hope out there, and I think you're seeing that in the people that we talk to and that share their ideas. What about you, Vala? What's going on your end?
I love the fact that you're inviting guest suggestions. Please, if you know someone that's doing extraordinary work, let Ray and I know, let Aubrey know, again, at DisrupTV show. And we would love to bring people that you admire, because the folks that watch this show, we admire you. So yeah, please recommend guests. I think we're booked for the next month or two, so there may be some delays, but we love to hear from you. We've got the second half of this year, and I'd love to fill every slot with people that you think we should be speaking to. And as long as their goal is to educate and inspire, they have a home here at Disrupt. Ray, I miss you. I can't wait to give you a physical hug, not a virtual one.
We're gonna go big. We're gonna go big.
And I just want everybody to stay healthy and safe. And we'll get back to a new norm, and we'll all adjust, and just keep that beginner's mindset. Let science guide your next steps, and we'll get through this together. Everyone's struggling. You're not alone. Everyone. Even on Fridays when Ray and I have this, great optimism, and trust me, it's tough. The last couple of months have been really tough for our families, friends, colleagues. So just know you're not alone. We're together. We're together.
If it's Friday, it's Disrupt TV. Come join us, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, every Friday. And catch us next week for episode 190. Oh, my God. 190. All right. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.